Hey guys, welcome back to the channel McNally Money, home of all things stock, investment, and personal finance related. Now for today's video, we're going to be welcoming back Nico Moran for a second time. He's the host of Simply Bitcoin, and the Bitcoin sector overall has been absolutely red hot on the backs of the Bitcoin spot ETF approval in the United States. So I've got a number of questions to ask Nico, get his opinion, and we've got a lot to go through in today's presentation. Now, before we get into all that, please take a second, hit the like button, you guys. It's a big help to myself and the channel. If you're not already subscribed, McNally Money, feel free to join. And let me know in the comment section below if you're currently holding any Bitcoin, if you've got exposure to the miners, and your thoughts on today's discussion. Now, with that being said, let's get into today's video. Okay guys, so that's right. Today's video, we're welcoming back Nico Moran. He's the Director of Content Strategy at Swan Bitcoin and the host of Simply Bitcoin. Nico, super exciting time in the Bitcoin space and really happy to have you back on the channel.
Happy to be back, man. Yeah, it's they don't call it the Bitcoin roller coaster for no reason, right? There's always ups and downs every week. I always get, kind of worried on Mondays because I'm like, hey, man, I'm gonna have nothing to talk about during the week. But then the news cycle comes along, and there's always, surprises around the corner. So yeah, really happy to be back.
No, it's awesome. Roller coaster's right, and it seems like we've been going through a bit of a trough, so it's nice to get back on one of the exciting parts. Now, we've got a lot to talk about. We're going to try and cover some of the recent events, some of the stuff you've been covering on your channel as well, Simply Bitcoin. First off, I think it's overdue for a quick intro. It was about 2 months ago that you came on the channel, Nico, so can you give us just a high-level intro on yourself and how you're kind of involved in the Bitcoin space?
Yeah, so I founded Simply Bitcoin in 2020. We're a small Bitcoin only media company. We release a daily show, which is what we're known for. It's 5 days a week. Sometimes we cover and we live stream conferences. The last one we did was BitBlock Boom a couple months ago. And yeah, just we have a small little publication arm on Substack. We're going to try to build that up. And then my other responsibility is I'm the director of content strategy, basically managing their YouTube and how to approach it, what type of content should they be making, that type of approach. So it's a privilege to work in the Bitcoin industry. I know a lot of people would want to work in it, so that's not something that I take lightly, and I try to put my heart and soul to provide not only value but provide some type of guidance, because I think that we're living through this very chaotic time, which is the disintermediation of money, so yeah, that's where I see myself currently.
Yeah, I would definitely say your sphere of influence is large in the space. Your Twitter following is growing daily. And on Simply Bitcoin, you guys definitely talk about a lot of different angles and kind of out of the box ideas related to the Bitcoin crypto space. So I'd encourage you guys to go take a look. Now, to kick things off with us today here, Nico, we've seen a lot of news and media about the regulatory environment, governments around the world starting to adopt crypto or Bitcoin, obviously the spot ETF in the United States. So can you tell us a little bit about, in your opinion, how all this regulatory noise is really impacting Bitcoin and the price of Bitcoin right now?
Yeah, so like for the first time in a while, we've seen the S&P plummet, and we saw the price of Bitcoin, pump, right? A decorrelation. Now, is that just because you're seeing a lot of the liquidity flow from the altcoins into Bitcoin, which usually happens during bear markets? Or is that finally the decoupling, right? I think it was actually Larry Fink himself on a Fox Business interview recently when he said, I'm paraphrasing here, but he said people are fleeing to quality, right? That's what that's what the general consensus is. So yeah, in terms of the regulatory environment, I don't know if we're going to get to this yet, but what happened last week was absolutely insane, right? We've had the anti-Bitcoin politician Elizabeth Warren take advantage of the tragedy that is happening in the Middle East to use a mainstream media legacy publication to try to sell to the American public, to the Treasury, under false narratives, right? It was discovered after the fact that there is a heavy correlation between the financing of terrorism and Bitcoin, right? We now know that the majority of terrorism financing is actually coming from the legacy financial system. It wasn't coming from Bitcoin. But that to me just tells me that they're trying to use any excuse. They're trying to throw stuff at the wall, see what sticks, because I think they see the writing on the wall. I think that they're used to operating in an environment where they have a monopoly on money. They're used to not having a competition with money, right? They're used to having that completely controlled by themselves. And now Bitcoin comes along, and to use Christine Lagarde's own words, who was the head of the IMF, who's currently the head of the European Central Bank, she says that Bitcoin is an escape valve, right? Maybe that was a little bit of a Freudian slip. It's an escape valve in the sense that it allows people to opt out of the legacy financial system. And look, the government in the US is not a monolith, right? But there are elements in the US government that really, really see that as a threat, right? And the reason that it's a threat, because it threatens their privilege of being able to create money for free. And they can only maintain that privilege if people are using their money in the first place. And when I mean their money, I mean the US dollar.
Yeah, it's really it does seem like kind of a last ditch effort to hold on to that control, and it's interesting now as we're seeing politicians on both sides, different parties take very different stances here. So we can jump right into that now, Nico. I know on the other side of the coin, we've had some of the presidential candidates really endorsing Bitcoin. RFK Jr. came out and said he bought a Bitcoin for each one of his grandchildren. So can you talk to us a little bit about that? Because it definitely is unsettling to see some of the people in the White House kind of losing control, losing power, but it's also encouraging to see some of the people really embracing Bitcoin and the control it gives back to the people.
100%. And it's bipartisan, which is like the part that really puts a smile on my face, because we have to understand that it is not left versus right. It is not Democrat versus Republican. Bitcoin is the great unifier, right? And as us, as individuals, we really have to inform the public on that, right? Because I think that what the political parties do is that they do this divide and conquer strategy where they convince, right, the other side. Let's say you're a Democrat, right? And let's say there's a Democrat in power. The Democrat is a president. All the Republicans are like, oh my God, all my economic hardships are coming from the fact that this person's in the White House. But it's a great scheme. It's a scam, because regardless of what political party is in office, they both do the same thing. They create money for free that everyone else has to work for, that disproportionately affects the lower and middle classes that don't have the means to save in assets. So they get poorer. And the wealthy that do have the means, they get significantly wealthier. And of course, that wealth redistribution mechanism goes from the lower and middle classes, and it goes back to the government and back to the very wealthy. Now, going back to your original question about the rise of pro-Bitcoin politicians, I'm extremely optimistic about it. And that's just because more and more of the US population are holding Bitcoin and altcoins, right? So all of a sudden they're like, like this, I kind of like this guy. It kind of makes sense. And what is the politician's job? The politician's job is to say things that are going to get them elected. So you have RFK Jr. on the Democratic side that did a speech at Bitcoin 2023 where he promised that he would protect the right for Bitcoiners to take self-custody, right? And then on the Republican side, you have Governor Ron DeSantis, who's also running for president. And he actually passed a bill, because he's also the governor of Florida, an anti-central bank digital currency bill and a pro-Bitcoin bill. And one of his promises that he said if he was elected into office is he literally wrote, I am going to protect Bitcoin. And then you have Vivek Ramaswamy, also very, very pro-Bitcoin. But this isn't just something happening in the United States. This is happening in Canada. And this is also the thing that got the most attentions as of late is you had a libertarian Austrian economist in Argentina he has an opportunity to win the presidency there, and he's saying stuff like, we must end the central bank. You have, I'm sorry, I'm not Canadian, so I'm going to butcher this pronunciation, but you have Polivar, and who's running against Justin Trudeau, again, he's super pro Bitcoin as well. So I think you're seeing the rise and the great awakening of people saying, hey, wait a second, why can I afford housing? Why do I have to work harder than my parents? Why am I poorer than my parents, even though the GDP has grown, even though technology has advanced? Why am I poor, right? And I think that inevitably leads to a very important question is, what is money? And I think more and more people by the day are asking the question, what is money?
Yeah, very well spoken, Nico. I love listening to it, and it feels like we're witnessing a revolution from the inside of the tornado or something here. And the more you learn about Bitcoin and the more problems it solves, it really does seem like kind of the perfect solution to a lot of these, as you mentioned, bipartisan issues and debates and arguments that have been going on for generations now, right? So appreciate your commentary there. And yes, definitely seeing it all across North and South America. Now, shifting gears a little bit, you mentioned a very interesting point that we just this week started to see a decoupling between the NASDAQ, a lot of the tech heavy stocks, and the price of Bitcoin. My channel focuses a lot on Bitcoin mining companies, and we've also seen a bit of a decouple there. It used to be that Bitcoin was up 1%, the miners were up 2 or 3. That's starting to change a little bit. So I wanted to get your opinion on Bitcoin price, the ETF. Do you think that's already been priced in at this point, or do you think we're just starting to see the momentum in terms of the Bitcoin price take off here?
Yeah, so I truly believe, just based on the previous halving cycles, Bitcoin follows a tried and tested pattern, right? Maybe it breaks, right? But so far, from a historical perspective, it hasn't broken that pattern. And the pattern is this: the year after the halving is usually about 9 months to 14 months. What tends to happen is the price of Bitcoin goes parabolic, right? The year before the halving, the official bear market starts, but it doesn't go and make those crazy, those crazy God candles like the Bitcoin community calls them yet, but it starts, it starts turning up ever so slowly, little by little by little by little by little. And I think what you're seeing here is just that. I think that you're seeing the beginnings of the next bull market. Now, does that mean that we're not going to go from 34 back to 25K? No, I'm not saying that at all. There's a tremendous amount of volatility that goes through the process. We could also wake up to 40K. I don't really know what the short term, where Bitcoin is going in the short term. And if anyone tells you otherwise, they're lying. Nobody knows. But the tried and true strategy that has worked is just dollar cost averaging. Focus on fiat mining, focus on increasing your Bitcoin position. What I always say is make sure that you have more Bitcoin than the day before. If you're doing that, you're doing fine. Some people like to trade, and I respect that. That's okay. But never make that more than 5 to 10% of your holdings. The rest of it, you should see Bitcoin as savings. The longer you hold on to it, the more you're going to think you're a genius, the more you think I made a really good financial decision. And to be blunt, it's not that you're a genius. It's just that you've transitioned to a money that is deflationary in nature, meaning it increases in purchasing power over time versus you living on the fiat mindset, which in terms makes you think short term. It's also very nihilistic because it's a question of, how will I ever be able to afford this apartment? I'll have to work harder. I have to spend that much time, versus the Bitcoin mindset. It's not a question of, will I ever be able to afford this apartment? It's a question of, how long do I have to wait to be able to afford this apartment, right? So we live in a world of a nihilistic fiat mindset, an inflationary mindset, versus the Bitcoin mindset, which is an optimistic deflationary mindset.
Exactly. Yeah, I saw an interesting quote the other day. It said 40% of the population plays the lottery, but only 0.1% holds Bitcoin. And it really speaks to your point around time value and people's perceived value of money and how that's shifting. Now, in terms of the price prediction on Bitcoin, I appreciate the transparency there. My old boss used to tell me I've got two balls and neither of them are crystals. So I guess none of us know where Bitcoin's going, but I definitely agree the momentum is building in our favor. Another really interesting point I saw is during the last bull cycle, when a lot of people were putting money into FTX and the likes of those kind of exchanges, because of some of the behavior going on there, some of that money wasn't actually being used to purchase Bitcoin. Whereas now with these ETFs and the potential spot approvals, there's going to be a tremendous amount of new capital flowing into the Bitcoin market in unison with the supply reduction next year in the halving. So how big of impact do you think these spot ETFs are going to have? And when do you think we're going to see them available for trading?
Yeah. So, and just to kind of give you, to tie up that last part. So in terms of price predictions, I don't like to give them, but let's just say it follows its current trend. You're seeing anywhere between $100 to $250,000 Bitcoin by the end of the last bull, the end of the cycle, which should put it at around the end of 2025, right? So with that being said, prepare accordingly. That's not to say that that doesn't break the trend. Maybe we just hit 100K, who knows? But one thing's for sure, infinity divided by 21 million, it's literally designed to go up forever. Michael Saylor's the famous meme, it's going up forever, Laura. It really is. To go back to your second point, what you're seeing is a couple of things, right? For the first time, this has never happened in Bitcoin's history, you're actually seeing the amount of Bitcoin held on exchanges go lower, right? You incorporate the halving into that, meaning the amount of Bitcoin that's being dumped on the market gets cut in half, right? And then you incorporate a BlackRock spot ETF, or all the other ETFs that have been applied. One of the coping mechanisms in 2018, one of the narratives that we used to make ourselves feel good while the price of Bitcoin was going down was the institutions are coming. The institutions are coming. The institutions are here, and not only are they here, they have shown tremendous interest, right? And then another thing that I want to talk about is the fact that Michael Saylor's public company strategy proving that not only is holding Bitcoin on his balance sheet a viable alternative to holding cash, it's actually a better alternative to holding cash. So in my eyes, you really have this perfect storm brewing of less Bitcoin on exchanges, the halving, the spot Bitcoin ETF, Michael Saylor being vindicated in the public company strategy, his Bitcoin strategy. And all of those elements, they combine to form, you're looking at this and you're like, holy cow, there's a storm coming. Let me catch that wave, right? Let me position myself to catch that wave. So to say the least, I'm extremely optimistic about the next 2 years. But there's also the macro environment, which we have to talk about, right? Which is the fact that, the S&P 500, it looks like it's about to go off a cliff. A lot of macro analysts are predicting a 2024 recession, right? And those are all things that Bitcoin has never really lived through before. Bitcoin has only lived through a heavy QE environment, so to speak. So the big question is, with all these good things happening with Bitcoin, is the potential 2024 recession going to affect the price of Bitcoin? I don't know. But I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to stay humble, stack sats, stay solvent, and buy more Bitcoin and save it for a rainy day.
There you go, dollar cost average. And the other two I wanted to throw in there, Nico, is geopolitical risk. Imagine you live in one of these poor countries that are going through these conflicts. You've saved your whole life to buy that house or business or condo or whatever, and the banking system, the money system, everything collapses, right? So I think that's going to have some pressure. And watching the US debt levels, they're going to have to fire up the money printer again. They're going to pump more fiat currency in, which is going to devalue. And I think in comparison, make Bitcoin look really favorable. But that's exactly why that decoupling is so important that you mentioned, because if the stock market does tank, we're hoping obviously that Bitcoin doesn't, right? So really interesting dynamics. And I like how you brought that point up as well. It'll be interesting to see kind of how this all plays out. But I similar to your strategy, I'm just continuing to buy as much as I can, and we'll see where we end up in a couple of years. And side note, that's exactly why on my channel I talk about a lot of the call option strategies or leaps dated for 2025, 2026, is to bridge over some of that halving activity that Nico mentioned there. So Nico, now kind of same tangent here. We've seen a lot of news now that the ETFs are starting to appear on some of the initial kind of phases or steps. We're seeing seeding happening, which means they're going out and purchasing Bitcoin for that initial launch or first day trading. Do you think that stuff's having an impact on the price? Do you think they're purposely keeping the price of Bitcoin kind of at a comfortable level to buy, or have we not really seen a lot of that impact the price yet?
Yeah, so the total crypto market cap has actually not broken previous all-time highs yet. So what I suspect was this previous pump is not only an anticipation, right? Because there was the fake Coin Telegraph article that, was the initial cause for the pump. Then there was what's this called? A custodial website that's very well respected added the BlackRock Spot Bitcoin ETF to its website, to its database. Then they deleted it, and then they added it back in. So I tweeted this out the other day. I'm like, look, I don't know what's going on with the spot ETFs, but I could tell you something, that there's definitely a lot going on in the background. I could tell you that for sure. So yeah, like I think that it's a combination of factors. I think it's a lot of the liquidity going out of altcoins into Bitcoin, which is perfectly normal during a bear market. And then also the anticipation, right? They're anticipating this. Now, there's another thing that, a lot of people are excited about the BlackRock Spot ETF and its potential impact on the price of Bitcoin. But we all have to be aware that the peaceful Bitcoin revolution happens when individuals take self-custody of their wealth, right? And buying an ETF, yeah, sure, it's convenient. You could open your Robinhood app, you can open your Charles Schwab account, buy, get exposure to Bitcoin. But really, what makes Bitcoin different from gold, right? Where gold failed, in my opinion, was the ability for individuals to take vast sums of wealth, millions, billions, theoretically trillions of dollars, into custody very easily. Literally, you write down a 12-word seed phrase, 24-word seed phrase, and theoretically you can memorize your access to millions, billions, trillions of dollars. That's what makes Bitcoin different, right? So it's a double-edged sword. I was speaking to Caitlin Long, and she was warning about the risks of potential rehypothecation. And that's something that FTX was doing. FTX was selling paper Bitcoin. They were selling Bitcoin that they didn't really have. That definitely caused price suppression in the last cycle. Not to mention the CCP banned Bitcoin mining within their borders, and you saw the price of Bitcoin and the hash rate drop at the same time. And those two factors are the reasons that I believe we did not hit 100K the previous cycle. So I think it's a double-edged sword. This ETF, I think, is definitely going to be positive for the price of Bitcoin. But the big question is, are they going to be selling paper Bitcoin? And if they are, that's definitely going to cause some type of downward sell pressure.
Gotcha. So you're telling me you don't have a large-scale gold vault in your basement, Nico, or what? You don't have Fort Knox down there?
I love gold. I get a lot of S from Bitcoiners for saying that. I love physical gold. Like, holding physical gold feels really, really nice. But its physical characteristics make it incredibly difficult to transport, incredibly difficult to trade quickly, incredibly difficult to, like, think about it. Are you going to go to a pharmacy store and you're going to take out your gold bar and a little chip, and you're like, tuck, 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 tuck. It's like, here you go. And then the cash register pulls out a weight and it's like, okay, you're good to go. Like, so I think gold is awesome. I think it did its job for now, but I think Bitcoin truly is the new gold, in my opinion.
Exactly. Yeah, we joke, but the divisibility is a big problem, and it's laid out quite nice in the Bitcoin standard. And I agree with you. It's a time and a place, right? At that point in history, they didn't have the internet and they didn't have technology like we do now. So I too like gold, but I think Bitcoin is a newer version of that. So, Nico, one of the things I really like about you is when you come on here, I look at Bitcoin a lot from a financial standpoint, but you really recommend and encourage people to self custody. You talk about the control that this gives back to the people, the benefit to society, and I really appreciate that kind of contrast. So, I wanted to switch gears now and talk about actual adoption, people using Bitcoin as legal tender now and in transactions day to day. What is the current state of this in the world? Is it practical? I know the Lightning Network is coming to increase the amount of transactions. Can you give us a bit of update on the actual practicality, technicality of how this could be implemented?
Yeah, so like I'll be honest with you, in its current form, Bitcoin is not going to be able to handle the world's, if everyone was on a Bitcoin standard and they're trying to transact, the mempool would be full, and also the fees will start to be, they won't make sense in terms of, lower amount of transactions. And I think that is the future we're heading to. But Bitcoin, you have to see it as the base layer, right? And the base layer has to be sound. So the rules have to be the way they are. The blocks have to stay the size they are because it's decentralization above all, right? If you increase the block size, right? This is what the whole block size war was about. That increases the resource requirements that's needed to run your own node, right? Run your own version of the Bitcoin software. If that increases the resource requirements, that makes it more expensive, and that raises the bar. So less and less people could run a node, which means that by definition it's less decentralized, right? You want more and more people to run their own nodes, so you actually want that very cheap. Now, if you compare it to the legacy system, right? Let's call cash the base layer. Most people don't use the base layer to transact. Most people are using second layer, third layer solutions, PayPal, debit cards, all the technology that was able to be built out over decades and decades and decades and decades of the legacy financial system. The Lightning Network launched in 2017, right? So it's not even that old. Now it's made tremendous improvements, tremendous progress since then, to the point that if one of the fastest ways to onboard someone onto Bitcoin is to get them to download Wallet of Satoshi without creating an account, without putting in your email, your password, or nothing. You download the wallet and boom, you're ready to receive Bitcoin. You're ready to receive Satoshis. So I think the Lightning Network is definitely a solution to the scaling of Bitcoin, but there needs to be better solutions as well. This is what entrepreneurs are for. It's a problem that needs to be solved. And when there's a problem that needs to be solved, that's when entrepreneurs come in and they see opportunity and they innovate, right? So there's been tremendous amount of not only liquidity being added to the Lightning Network, but the use of the Lightning Network continues to increase year after year after year after year, and it will get perfected. It will get so easy, your grandma could use it. We're not quite there yet, but the way that I compare it is, was the internet easy to use in the 90s? No, it was terrible UI, it was it was slow, it was clunky, right? So it was only after a couple decades that the internet has become seamless with society. Right now we're just, we're talking over video instantaneously, hundreds if not thousands of miles away from each other. If I would have told you this was possible back in the 90s, you would have laughed me out of the room. You would have been like, that is absolutely ridiculous. So trying to envision lightning scaling or second layer or third layer Bitcoin a decade from now, 20 years from now, right? When entrepreneurs fix it or try to provide solution, I think it's going to be it's going to be very difficult to envision that future. But I have no doubt in my mind that entrepreneurs are going to be willing to solve that, not only because they're going to be holders of Bitcoin, but also because I think that it's a problem that needs to be solved if Bitcoin is to scale, because Bitcoin needs to scale to become the next world reserve currency.
Agreed. Yeah, it's interesting. I interview a lot of the miner CEOs, and I was saying, when do you think the mining business will be viable until? And he said till the last halving, till 2140, because there's going to be a demand for it. And that's almost the problem with Bitcoin is once you hold it, I never want to sell it, right? Because I'm so optimistic about the development and future. And everyone always says, yeah, it's X divided by 21 million, when in reality, I think there's a lot fewer Bitcoin that people are actually willing to part with and sell and have access to than the initial 21 million, not to mention the unmined stuff. So, Nico, I know we've covered a lot of different stuff in the discussion. I wanted to kick it back to you for some closing thoughts. Anything on your mind that maybe we missed or keeping you up at night in terms of Bitcoin right now?
Yeah, so I think that the last week that the Elizabeth Warren attack with her and her media allies was, to me, it was really a representation of the fact that we're winning. They would not go to these lengths if they didn't feel desperate. At around the same time, we had a video released by the head of the European Central Bank, Christine Lagarde, and she was basically saying the digital euro is coming. She got community noted, right? The community that said like the central bank digital currencies are not necessary. Privacy is going to be very difficult for them. And then the fact that the Wall Street Journal, it was yesterday, had to retract the article and offer a correction tells me that their old ways, their standard operating procedure from the past, where they had a total monopoly on information because they control the gatekeepers of information, is gone. The internet has empowered individuals, but only if you choose to use that power. So if you ever see a central banker or a politician who's anti-Bitcoin and they're tweeting something out and you know it's false, even if you don't have a large account, every meme that you make, every like, that if you like a big account who's responding to them, every video that you make that provides a counter narrative to what they're trying to, convince the uninformed of, basically acts like a metaphorical bullet in this narrative trench warfare that we're fighting on the battlegrounds of the internet to win over the hearts and minds of individuals, to convince them that it's not left versus right. It's the party of green, central bank digital currencies, fiat, censorship, slavery, versus the party of Bitcoin, the party of freedom, optimism, prosperity. And that would be my parting message, right? Don't ask what Bitcoin could do for you. Ask what you can do for Bitcoin and get involved. Take agency, take action, convince the people around you, right? And I think we're going to win this thing 100%.
I love it. Giving power to the people. It's almost poetic listening to you, Nico, and I really appreciate the understanding and the perspective you give on this situation. So I look forward to having you back in a couple of months. I'll leave your social media handles linked below in the comment section or the video description. If you guys are still watching the video at this point, hopefully you found some value. So like Nico said, every like, share, subscribe you can provide us, either one of our channels really does help. And Nico, we really appreciate your time. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, man.